Test.
I might have to turn you up. I don't know. I think when the audio got bugged, you were like a little quiet for me,
I
but
think I think my mic was a little further away, maybe.
usually I'm able to like fix it within the first minute. Like when we do our intro, I'm usually able to like level it out a little bit.
You definitely sound better on stream. No, I mean you sound fine in the call, but like you sound louder, clearer in the stream. I guess I don't know. I can tell a difference at least. Another afternoon edition of Ego Chall Podcast live during the upcoming week of CDL online qualifier matches for Major 2. Post. Alrighty.
We get started.
Yes, sir.
Hello and welcome to episode 158 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we're talking a little bit LAG, probably a lot LAG to be honest, based on our notes. We got some rumors to talk about, and we're just going to talk about the state of LAG and maybe a potential roster change, another roster change in the works. And we got some other stuff to talk about before we get to the CDL qualifiers, which return this weekend after the minor last weekend. We're back to the qualifiers, and we're very quickly approaching Major 2, but we have to talk about these qualifiers first and give our predictions at the end of the show. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Like you said, not a whole lot going on, but we do have some qualifiers coming up and some potential rumors and whatnot on the roster front. So it should be a decent show for a little afternoon edition here, and we can just hop right in.
Yeah, so the thing right now, it seems, is the rumor, I guess, going around right now is Hook possibly going to LAG. And I should note that that is really just a rumor. I don't think any reputable reports have come out about that. But I think just in general, we are curious about where Hook will be maybe in these Major 2 qualifiers. I tend to think it'll be after Major 2 and just a hard reset for some of these teams after Major 2 at the halfway point of the season. I think that's when teams would certainly give a better look at their roster and kind of look forward to what is to come in the back half of the season. But this was according to Zuma's cousin, Vinny, and he tweeted something about Hook joining LAG, and then Zuma said, "What does this guy know, bro? Is he trolling?" I think that obviously Hook has been on LAG before. Granted, it was a completely different era, different regime for LAG. Although I do think Marky B is still involved with LAG, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's an assistant, right? Yeah, so I think he's an assistant coach. And he was, at the time, I believe he was the GM when Hook was there. I could be mistaken. I think their paths crossed with LAG. Regardless, Hook has been on the Guerrillas before. He is without a team, and it doesn't seem like Optic Texas will be open, although that would be incredibly interesting. I don't think Atlanta FaZe will be open, Vancouver Surge, et cetera, et cetera. You go down the line, LAT. There's just not that many options, I would say, for Hook if he is to come back into the CDL after Major 2. LAG, with the state of their team, with the roster changes that they've already made, and really just the overall record that they've posted so far this season, that would seem like as likely of a landing spot for Hook as one could think of. I don't know if you agree with that, but what do you think of the rumors, I guess, that Hook might be joining LAG, or that could be just a good fit for him.
Yeah, I just went and I wanted to check Vinny's Twitter. Obviously, this came from a clip from Zuma's stream, and just for those who don't know, Vinny has been involved in challengers over the years. I don't know his exact involvement today, but I know like previously he coached Standy, I believe, before Standy got picked up for the first time on Minnesota before the Minnesota Miracle in like 2021, 2022, whenever that was. So I know he has had some involvement in challengers. So it's very possible he could know something. I just went and tried to check his Twitter, though. It looks like that tweet that Zuma pulled up was deleted, which that can mean multiple things. As we know from our journalist background, it could mean that somebody told him to delete it because it's actually true, or he deleted it because it's not true, and he doesn't want to look like an idiot. So there's a whole lot of stuff that could be coming from this, or it could just be nothing in general. Nobody has reported on any of this LAG stuff. I think that's worth mentioning, like nothing from Breaking Point, nothing from Crone. So it doesn't seem like anything is solidified, at least. And obviously with matches coming up in a couple days, as we've talked about earlier this season, unless there's like an emergency situation, the roster new reports or the rosters for CDL matches allegedly have to be turned in on the Monday of that week. So it feels like if something was to happen right now, it would have already it would have already been, in the works, and there would have been reports on it and all that stuff. So this rumor on Hook, and there's also a rumor going around from Fellow, just because Fellow simply tweeted like the signing gif, but it wasn't the contract gif. It was signing a camera. So a little different there, but all this goes to say is there's speculation around GentleMates roster, and I think that's worth talking about, whether any change or whatnot is happening. Obviously, these past couple weeks, they bring in Lunars, bench Priesta, then they bench Skies and bring in Priesta. With the Lunars and Priesta combo, they beat Miami. With Lunars and Skies, they didn't beat Miami, but they still they lost to Carolina, I believe, in the minor, and that's so it's very small sample size for all of these roster combinations. There was also a tweet in the rumor around the Fellow potentially signing. I mean, someone even said Optic Fellow, which we've gone over that. I don't see that happening. But someone else on Twitter said that Lunars and Priesta had their like LAG affiliate thing on Twitter taken away, which I didn't even look to see beforehand if they actually had it. If you go to their accounts, Lynn's, Kismet, and Skies have it on their Twitters. Lunar and Priesta don't. So there's a whole lot of just speculation going around. I would be, especially Lunars, like it would be very surprising to me if they just completely scrapped that. It would be literally 2 weeks since, because he didn't play in their week 1 matches, did he? I don't think he did. I think he only played week 2 in the minor, so I'm pretty sure it would literally be 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, either way, that's it also just doesn't make sense, like logically, to bring in his former teammate in challengers and then like get rid of him as well. Yeah. So he played two major qualifiers. So he's only played 1 week of qualifiers, and then he played the minor. That's all he's done in the CDL so far.
Yeah. So long-winded answer, or just conversation here, just around GentleMates in general. It feels like something is coming. If to their credit, they have recognized early on they have not had the start to the season that they likely wanted to have, and they have been trying to adjust and trying to make moves. And we obviously know from the past, like previous iterations of LAG might not have been willing to make moves or spend money for whatever reason. And obviously it wasn't to the extent of previous Vegas Legion or Paris Legion rosters, but nonetheless, I just think all this stuff we're gonna have to wait and see. I think it's we're always willing to point out, even with reports, that stuff can change. I think the fact that none of this stuff is even being reported on makes this even less likely to happen, at least immediately. And we're just going to have to sit back and wait and see what happens. But we'll talk a little bit more about LAG later on when we get into our predictions. They have a big match this week that could definitely impact the future of this roster.
Yeah, obviously they're one of the worst teams. Besides Vegas, they are the worst team. I don't think that there's any doubt about that. Like, they're in a pretty distant 11th place right now, and I mean, Vegas is probably not going to win for a while, so like they are kind of like stuck there. But it just is. It's pretty sad because I think both of us had. I wouldn't say like high expectations of like, oh, they're going to be in the top 4 or anything, but certainly I thought they could compete in the middle of the pack and be a team like Miami, or maybe even what Vancouver has done. Maybe not to that extreme where they're competing at the very top, but certainly being able to upset teams at the very top on a occasional basis. And none of that has came to fruition so far this season, which is honestly pretty stunning. Part of that, and it's something that we've talked about kind of at length on the podcast, is they've been horrific in search and destroy, which has obviously hurt them pretty heavily. They've lost quite a few game 5s, which is kind of a trend among those bottom teams. Additionally, they've been bad in hard point too. So like, obviously, like that's literally 4 of the 5 maps in a series. Like, they're above 500 in control, and then they're 9-15 in hard point, 6-14 in search. Like, that's just not gonna, like, you can have one of those maybe, but both of those is why they're so far down. Like you said, they did beat Miami in the minor, so that was their first win since January 25th, which was against Vegas. And so they've only beaten C9. They beat them 3-0 on January 17th, which was their second game back from the break. They beat Vegas the very next weekend, which is, of course, and then they beat Miami 3-2, but that doesn't count toward any standings, and that sucks for them because they certainly could use those points. But since it happened in the minor, they didn't get far enough in the minor. They are not going to get any CDL points, and it's basically a worthless win in the grand scheme of things, especially if they make this roster change and they make any roster change, I guess. But I also, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, if they were to bring in Fellow, what is the point of getting rid of Lunars as well? Like, I don't think that, I think the affiliate badge on Twitter, I think that's like not anything to really worry about. Especially because Lunars doesn't have it. Maybe it means something for the guys that did have it and now don't have it, but I don't think Lunars lost it. Like, that just wouldn't make sense. Like, why even look at Fellow if you're not going to like at least give him a shot to play with his former teammate? And that's the something that we had talked about a few weeks ago is like, bring these guys up together. Maybe they can change the culture of a team more so than just a single player can, especially Lunars, who hadn't ever been in the CDL before. Like, Fellow at least has he has a ton of experience in the CDL, a ton of experience in professional Call of Duty. He kind of knows what to expect, and people know what to expect of him. He can give some leadership and some guidance that this team does seem like they're lacking in, which is, I think, pretty surprising in of itself, because I never really thought of the subliners as like they had like a super veteran like vocal leader. I never really got that vibe from any of them. And then obviously this is 3/4 of the team, and I guess just losing Hydra, which is as big of a loss as you possibly can have, like that's kind of shown the glaring weaknesses of this team at this point in time, which it really sucks. And I had I thought like at the beginning of the season, man, they're gonna break through. Like they're losing just here and there. Like if they can just tweak this thing or that thing, man, they're gonna take off, and that just hasn't happened. And they're really at risk of basically like losing any opportunity to get to champs if this continues for too much longer. So, but we'll get to all of that and and talk about more of the LAG stuff as like you said, as we get into their matches. Let's talk about the minor two viewership.
Yeah.
This is according to esports charts, which they do all of the viewership stuff. So if you're ever interested in what viewership like the esports events have, and I think they even do some like more general gaming stuff too, you can go check them out. So the most popular match in terms of peak viewers, this was the LAG versus Miami Heretics match, which is obviously LAG won this match and it went to game 5. This had 152,000 viewers, 10,000 more than Optic Texas versus Toronto Ultra, which was the second place. Optic had the second and third most watched matches, and then Vancouver, I guess, was they played Atlanta FaZe, which obviously that's a pretty big matchup considering Vancouver had just beaten them. And then the grand final is Vancouver versus LAT, which went to a game 7. So people probably tuned in more toward the end of that match. That was the 4th most watched, which, I mean, all of the viewership numbers that have come out so far this season have indicated one thing. LAG are a juggernaut. Like, they are very, very popular, and it's mostly because of Gotaga and that connection. But no, the juggernaut in terms of viewership, not
you say GentleMates is a juggernaut.
Yeah, the GentleMates connection has made LAG into a more popular team than it. Really, there's not like Heretics did not bring in this kind of viewership with that connection. Optic has dominated viewership year over year. And then, there's LAT. They have some viewership. FaZe has some viewership. But this has been kind of a revelation that this French, I think the primarily French-speaking audience is tuning in to see LAG and support GentleMates as a whole. And that's been a really big thing. And I think that's awesome. We've been missing that. Because of the way the CDL has been working since its inception, we really haven't gotten like that regionalization. Like like Vitality used to be the thing in France, at least in Call of Duty, and Gotaga was obviously a big part of that. We had different Spanish teams and different English teams, of course, and because a lot of these rosters are mixed now, where you have European players playing with North American players, none of these teams are technically representing any European cities. I think a lot of that has been lost, but we've kind of found it again with LAG because of GentleMates, and that's been amazing. I want to get your thoughts on this because it's been something that's been tracked now for months at this point. Do you think more teams should try to take this? You can't really replicate like a Gotaga effect,
yeah.
but you could. I mean, I guess you could partner with some of these streamers and partner with some of these very big personalities. You're just not going to get like the ownership aspect of it. I don't know if there's a way to kind of replicate or try to get some of that back with other teams. Do you think more teams should be trying to reach out to certain communities to try to increase their viewership or brand or their brand awareness?
Yeah, I mean that's like, big picture, like all of these teams should want to be able to have an impact like that. Like obviously, like you said, Optic have, dominated viewership since, really the inception of Call
The
of Duty
founding of
esports.
Optic.
But like outside of that anomaly, like, even you look at a team like LA Thieves, like even Gotaga has been referred to as like the French nade shot, right? Like it's
Yeah.
And no shot at nade or anything, but nades watch parties and stuff haven't had that same impact as Gotaga's have, as evidence here. And Nade's teams have definitely been better than this current GentleMates roster. So I think that's the most interesting thing. And piggybacking off what you said just a couple minutes ago before we started this topic was, this GentleMates team is in danger of missing champs, which means they haven't been good this year. That can't be debated. And they are still doing well in terms of viewership for most of their matches. There was that clip we saw after they were eliminated from Major One of like all the GentleMates fans like surrounding them and cheering on the players in person after they just lost. Like it just seems like, you know, it's a fan base that's really embracing being involved in the CDL, and I think that's like the big picture thing. Like it's very difficult for anybody to try and replicate the impact that Gotaga and GentleMates have had in terms of viewership and whatnot early on here. But there are, you know, names and legacy brands in Call of Duty. Immediately think of like Envy that we've talked about earlier, something like Rise Nation, like, you know, former teams that have had success in Call of Duty, and if they were to return, they would have fans, but it wouldn't be anything to the scale of what we're seeing here, where they, you know, in their first year, especially if they have a bad, like, I mean, if they're in their first year and they have a undefeated best team in the league, maybe they get a fraction of this viewership. But if they were in the position GentleMates, like, let's just use Envy as an example. If Envy signs a team of like Hook, Illy, and whatever, and returns to CDL next year, like if they're good, they're gonna have some viewership, but I wouldn't even expect it to be close to these numbers. And if they were a bad team, they're definitely not having the same viewership that we're seeing from GentleMates early on. So that's interesting, and I think that also plays into something we talked about multiple times over the years now with like the Paris Legion before this GentleMates thing started. Was we were always jesting that Paris Legion, when they just weren't a good team, you could buy into that Paris demographic and try to build around the French fandom. And this was before Hydra was even in the CDL. We were talking about this. And just imagine in a world where Paris Legion somehow landed Hydra and build around Hydra, maybe the Paris is winning champs crew would have gotten a ring to celebrate. But now you're looking at it like GentleMates has Lens. That's what makes me really think, like, in all this roster talk, it would just be weird if they got rid of Lens. And the other part of it is something I talked about when we were talking about before Lunars even joined, with someone like Cobra, who's another French player, and he's been talked about in challengers and stuff. I wouldn't have been surprised if they gave him a shot, just again feeding into that French fandom and trying to build something that, you know, those fans are already rallying around this team when it's at its lowest. Like it, like you said, the literally, it really can't get much worse from what we've seen so far from them this year. And if they start to build, so like they're starting ground floor here, and we're still getting over 150,000 viewers for their matches in an online minor tournament. If they are able to build a foundation there with the French fandom and connection, and start to have more success, those numbers in theory can only continue to go up. And that's like, you know, that's exciting to think about. And it's also, I kind of went off topic, but what you said was like they're in danger of missing champs. If I'm the CDL or the league and I see these numbers, we're like, yeah, we want GentleMates at champs, right? It's like there's a chance if they're not there, then you're missing out on all this viewership. So interesting numbers. Like you said, not surprising to see some of the names there, but obviously you have a match here between GentleMates and Miami Heretics as the most viewed match of the minor. That definitely raises some eyebrows and gets the wheels turning up top there.
In terms of overall viewership, this is according to Crone and like via esports charts, but basically the peak was down about 10% from minor one, the peak of 153,000. The average viewership was 95,000, which was just very slightly down a percent compared to minor one, which is, you know, interesting. I don't think there, I don't know, like there wasn't as much intrigue about the second minor as the first, just because the first is the first. Like you just want to see how it goes, and I think people were also kind of itching for Call of Duty in general to be back, because that was the return after a month-long break, whereas this was just kind of a continuation of what we've been seeing week over week. which is nice in terms of consistency and seeing how these teams kind of evolve rather than, not seeing them for an entire month. And it's like, how much has this team changed when we haven't seen them at all? But I think in terms of the GentleMates thing, it's cool. It's something that, teams should take advantage of as much as they can. I would love to see more regionalization in terms of like not just in name only, but adopting teams. Like we used to have Mind Freak and Tainted Minds, and then I think Renegades for like very briefly, but like those teams represented Australia, the APAC region, and we knew we were going to get like a good but not great APAC team coming from there. And we had UK teams, we had Spanish teams, we had French teams, and we just don't have that very much anymore. And maybe LAG at some point will decide we're just going to go all in with our French guys. If they could get Hydra, I'm sure they would. Like, I'm sure they would go all out to get him. But I just don't see that happening. I think unless he got assurances that they're going to be very, very competitive, it just doesn't seem like that's the case because he's going to get paid big dollars by LAT, Optic, FaZe, whoever wants to pay. Whoever wants to compete will probably pay him a lot of money. So, I would love to see more of this, but it's kind of hard, like I said, to replicate Gotaga. Like they're not growing on trees. So we're going to hopefully see more of LAG. Hopefully if they win, then the viewership will keep rising, and that's good for everybody, not just for LAG. Last thing here, and it's not LAG related, but you did mention Envy a few minutes ago and how, what if they, signed Illy and Hook, for example, and they brought back a team next year for COD. Hastro actually tweeted this earlier on Wednesday. He said, "For the first time in 19 years, I'm not playing, coaching, or owning / operating a Tier 1 Call of Duty team. It has been real family. You all changed my life for the better and gave me friendships and love I will cherish forever. Maybe we can get back into the fray someday. I just wanted to say thank you." So obviously this kind of stirred some people into like fury and like, people, I guess because he mentioned Call of Duty and it's just Envy, there's always going to be speculation that they're going to bring back a Call of Duty team because that's their bread and butter, or that was their bread and butter, I should say, and what they built their brand on and everything. I think, and I told you this before we went live, it's just like, I think if there was no buy-in and there was no exclusivity, it wasn't a 12-team league, it was just an open system, I think Envy would already have a team and they would be really trying to compete. But it's a 12-team league and it's closed. Like, it's as closed as one can get. They haven't had expansion at any point in the league's history. And he only got the Envy brand back like last month. So I think it's going to take some time. I do think in the offseason we will hear rumors. I would imagine that he will try to get back into Call of Duty. Like he's made no bones about that, like throughout his time, that Call of Duty, I mean, he was literally a pro COD player at one point in time. Like that was,
many moons ago.
Yeah. Very many. But like that's the Envy brand. Like I know they branched out into Counter-Strike, and obviously Envy branched off into the Overwatch League with the Dallas Fuel and then the Dallas Empire and the CDL. And they've done a lot of things in esports in general, but it's kind of like Optic and FaZe. These are Call of Duty brands. This is what people expect of those brands, is to be in Call of Duty. And that, you can't say that for everything. Like 100 Thieves, I don't know. Like, I don't really consider that to be a Call of Duty brand. I more think of LCS when I think of 100 Thieves, just simply because I think they've been in there longer continuously because they weren't a part of the CDL to begin with. They were they had the prison team and then they went away. And so, but then there's, other teams that I don't think of them as Call of Duty teams, but I think of Envy, I think of FaZe, and I think of Optic as the big three, so to speak. And it does not feel right to not have Envy in any CDL or Call of Duty World League. It's not right. And I hope that we get it fixed. Do you think that it will be fixed next season or two?
I don't know if it'll be fixed for sure, but obviously, like you said, I think the CDL would be better off with Envy involved in some capacity. Um, Literally the last thing we were just talking about from a viewership perspective, I wouldn't expect this to be something that drastically moves the needle, but it's just that brand is so ingrained in Call of Duty history, like you said, that you would think it would have some sort of positive impact, and people would be excited about it coming back. And I just think all around, like, whatever capacity it happens in or it doesn't happen in, um, the CDL would be better off with Envy involved. And I think, you said it's only been around a month since Hastro reacquired the brand, and I believe I'm just checking the Twitter. I don't see the tweet. They had an Apex team competing in the World Championship. I don't see that tweet anymore. Well, maybe Hastro just tweeted it and not the MV brand because he didn't have the account yet. But they signed a Smash player, Wizrobe or Wizroby. It says welcome back, and so he must have been on MV before, I'd assume. And literally 23 hours ago, Envy signed a Marvel Rivals team, which Marvel Rivals has been all the rage recently, and some organizations are starting to, try and do acquire esports players and whatnot for that. So I think that in itself, like recently acquiring a Marvel Rivals team, I think that speaks volumes to what would be happening if there was some immediate opportunity for Hastro and Envy to get involved in the CDL. Like literally today, I think he would do it. But like you said, without expansion or without any clear cut path to being involved in the CDL, specifically like the top echelon of competitive Call of Duty, we're just gonna have to sit back and wait and see if an opportunity presents itself to Hastro and MV. Because I've said this on other episodes, like I could see him, especially with Hook being in like his limbo state, for lack of a better term, right now. Like I could very easily see Hastro being like, yeah, I'll do an Envy Challengers team around Hook for this year, but Hastro isn't dumb. He knows, what Challengers Call of Duty is, the lack of
It's a money sink.
return on investment. Yeah, so I think we'll have to, like you said, literally it's been if it's been over a month, it's not too long beyond a month. So it's around a month that Hastro has officially had Envy back, or it's going to take some time before he's officially back in Call of Duty. I think that's the bigger takeaway here from his tweet. The way I saw this tweet was on the COD Comp Reddit, and the title was like, Envy COD back in 2026 with the eyes emoji. And I'm like, that's not what I took away from this. Like, I guess I can see how you get there, but I think he's really, just speaking to the community and saying, this is a weird spot. It's the first time I'm not involved in almost 2 decades, and I'd like to be back, but it's not happening right now. That's how I interpret it, at least.
Yeah, and that's probably the way it was intended. It's just tough. Like there should be expansion because there are brands reportedly that are interested in getting involved in Call of Duty, especially when you don't have to pay $25 to $35 million. I think that was a big turnoff, as it was probably meant to be for a lot of organizations. But like, that was antithetical to what competitive COD is supposed to be about. And like you said, it doesn't make sense for Hastro or really anybody to get involved in challengers. If that's something you want to support, that's something that you want to do, then go right ahead. But from a business perspective, esports is unprofitable by and large. Challengers is like ridiculous. Like there's very little to be gained for a lot of those organizations by funding challengers teams. So the ones that do it and do it right, that's a real kudos to them, because they're taking on a lot of risk, I guess is the right word, but it's just like they're not going to make a profit back, very, very likely. And there's also no assurance that, let's say, because we've seen it with Optic Nation before, like what was that? The general Optic Nation, like in 2022 or 2023, when they had that team for a little bit. Even if Hastro was like, hey, I'm going to fund, like, for example, Hook and Illy to play in Challengers together, and they're going to be Team Envy in Challengers. There's no guarantee that Hook and Illy are going to be on that team in a month or even a week. Like, so, and that team might just go away if he doesn't have Hook and Illy on that team, and he's just all right, like, screw it, like, I'm not going to fund this team. That's a real thing. That happens so often in Challengers, where teams just fall apart or guys get called up and get signed to a CDL team. Like Hook could get signed any day by a team, and he no longer is in Challengers, of course. But yeah, that's just Challengers. I mean, that's a bad way that's a really pessimistic way of looking at Challengers, but probably that's the most realistic way to look at Challengers. Let's get into these predictions, right? Let's talk about the Major 2 qualifiers. We are now in week 3, or about to enter week 3 of the Major 2 qualifiers. And then, of course, in a few weeks, we will have Major 2, which is in Texas. It could be Optic Texas starting in the losers bracket of their own tournament, which would not be great for viewership that we were just talking about. But Friday, March 7th, the return of the qualifiers, the first match, Vancouver versus LAT, a rematch from the Minor 1 Grand Finals, which obviously went to Game 7. Vancouver, having the performance of a lifetime and looking like a legitimate contender over these last few weeks. I'm going to go with LAT as my prediction. They won in Game 7, but this is about as close as it can be, considering how closely they just played each other last weekend.
Yeah, I wanted to see who you were going to go with. I had a feeling you'd take LAT, just because it is, like you said, a rematch of the grand finals. But if you go back and look at the series, I do think it's important that Vancouver won both hard points in that series. And if it was a best of 5, I have a sneeze coming. This is really bad time. Oh God, that sucks.
I'll cut that out.
I lost my train of thought. Vancouver won both hard points in the grand finals for against LA Thieves in the minor, and if it was a best of 5, Vancouver won the red card search and destroy in map 5. So if it was only a best of 5, Vancouver technically would have won 3-2. LA Thieves had that advantage in the controls and in the searches outside of the map 5. So it will be interesting to see this rematch, just because of, how I don't think single-sided is the right phrase, but for lack of a better term, like with one team being super successful in the hard points, another team dominating the controls and the search for the most part. If anything, like tweaks, like if LAT is able to take a hard point or Vancouver is able to take a search, that changes that narrative and dynamic a little bit. So either way, I think this should be another. I mean, the minor series went down to Game 7. I could see this going to a Game 5. I'm gonna take Vancouver just to make sure we have something different here. But yeah, I mean, LAT is probably the smarter pick, just because they literally won the last matchup.
Yeah, and LAT hasn't lost to anybody else other than Atlanta FaZe in more than a month. Obviously, they lost to FaZe twice at Major 1, and they've obviously been on a heater since then. Since the Major, they've won 3 qualifiers. They won 3 minor matches, so they have a 6-match win streak coming into this one. But we saw at the end of the Major 1 qualifiers, LAT kind of tailed off a little bit there, and maybe it happens here in the Major 2 qualifiers. Toronto versus Vegas up next. Gonna go with the Ultra.
Yep, give me Toronto.
And the last match on Friday is C9 versus LAG. No clue if LAG's roster will be as it is, or as it was last weekend, because we didn't know that Priesta for sure was coming into the roster when that happened in the minor. So I'm going to go with the C9 regardless of what roster they field.
Yeah, I'll take C9 here. I don't think there's much else to really say. Yeah, it's tough without knowing what's going on. I have a feeling it's going to be the same roster we saw at the minor, but
Yeah, probably.
as is Ego Chall tradition, there's a very strong possibility that immediately after we end this show today, LAG announce a roster change. I wouldn't be surprised at this point, but even in that scenario, it'd be a new roster going up against C9, and C9 has had the internet issues all year, so it's worth mentioning there could be some funky stuff going on with that, but for now, C9's been the better team. I'll take them.
Well, in LAG, even if we had done a podcast like last Thursday, I think they announced that Priestley was coming in on Friday morning right before their match. So we have no chance of doing that. I think the smart play, regardless of the roster, is probably to go C9 here. Saturday, March 8th, Atlanta versus Minnesota. I'm going to go with FaZe, but I'm interested to see if Minnesota is able to kind of bounce back after a disappointing minor performance.
I mean, I wouldn't go. I obviously
disappointing because I just thought they'd be able to get out of the first round.
I mean, they had arguably the toughest matchup playing against C9. It went down to a game 5, which they had. It's just that's the thing with Minnesota is even in this matchup. Like I'm gonna take Atlanta. I could see it going to a game 5 though, just because that's been Minnesota's shtick all year really. But yeah, I think it's an opportunity for us to see how Minnesota stacks up to Atlanta. They've played the quote unquote top teams tough most of the season. But I just think Atlanta gets back to form here and picks up a win.
It's also like you can say that about the minor performances in general because it's single elimination.
Exactly.
And
it's tough.
Like Minnesota played 5 maps, I think it was, and they lost. So they get the same placing as Vegas, and they are not on the same plane, Minnesota and Vegas. But in terms of placing, that's where they are. But I just think it's kind of a lost weekend for them because they didn't really get anything out of it. They didn't get to play a lot of matches, which I think helps in general. A lot of those teams get extra practice. But we'll see what happens in that match. Next up, C9 versus Carolina, which that's a pretty interesting matchup. I have no idea how C9 plays online in general, so I'm going to go with Carolina, just kind of figuring that the Royal Ravens will be able to pull that one out.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Carolina too, but I think, I don't know exactly like how the map lines up with where Toronto is in Canada, and I'm pretty sure Toronto is like close to the East Coast, but I don't know, my Canadian geography. But reason I bring that up is because we saw in that the Cloud9 versus Toronto online qualifier match, I think in week 1 of this set of qualifiers, Cloud9 got the better of them. Kleenex had a really bad statistical performance, and there were talks of potential server issues and whatnot because it was a battle of across the country really. So with Carolina playing from Carolina, C9 playing from LA, there could be some stuff going on in this match that throws it, makes it a little less conventional than you might expect between these two teams if they play on land. But I think Carolina's the better team either way, and I'm going to go with them here.
Carolina's also won each of the 2 previous matchups, although both matches went to game 5. The first matchup was before the holiday break, and it was a banger first hard point. The second match that they had, it was a banger first hard point that C9 won both. But Carolina won a round 11 S&D in the last game of their second match, and then won 6-3 in the first match. So it's going to be interesting. Like if that holds up, then we're going to have a great match on our hands, and probably some complaints about the online stuff as well. LAT versus Boston, got to go with the Thieves.
Yeah, Boston haven't looked great, and you have been number 1 Boston / Snoopy fan on the year. So if you're not taking them over the Thieves, I certainly am not. So give me the Thieves.
I may be a little silly about Boston, but I don't think I'm stupid about them. But I just don't think that they're gonna be able to match up against LAT. Although I think LAT's last non-phase loss was to the Boston Breach, which was in the Major 1 qualifiers. So we'll see. Optic versus Miami in this match. Man, I'm going to go with the Heretics. I cannot pick Optic in good conscience until they start winning, and I don't count Vegas matches.
All right, I'm going to take Optic. Really not a huge fan of it, but it's tough.
On paper, there's no comparison. It should be Optic.
Should be the better team here.
And but everything we've seen is like the complete opposite.
Yeah. So I don't feel good about it. I'll take Optic and probably get this one wrong, but hey, gives us something to talk about when we're live next.
Yeah. I mean, it's just going to be another because Optic, we'll talk about it in just a minute, but Optic has a tough second match, like a tougher second match than Miami. And there's a pretty good chance that they go 0-2, like especially if they lose to Miami. No one should have faith that they're going to win their second match, and them going 0-2 again and continuing to slide down, and I think going 0-2 would just about guarantee them in the losers bracket. Like, I don't know, maybe there's a tiebreaker out there that could save them, but I don't think so. But yeah, that would be horrific for Optic. Sunday, March 9th, the last day of the qualifiers, Vegas versus LAG. Man, this is a great matchup for LAG. Like, hopefully they win. So I'm going to go at the Guerrillas.
I mean, this is a banger alert. Like, this is what I was hinting at. I forgot LAG mates also play Cloud9. I thought it was a one-match week for them for Vegas, but, like, this is really a make-or-break match for GentleMates. If they somehow lose to Vegas Falcons and they don't make a roster change before that match, like, they almost have to make a change after the fact if they lose. I mean, if you're looking at this from a Vegas perspective, it's basically 12 versus 11 in the standings. Like, this is, in theory, your most winnable match. And if you can't get the job done here, who knows? For both teams, really. Like, if Falcons can't get this win against a GentleMate squad that is in theory at its most vulnerable, will Vegas have another opportunity to get a win this year? That's worth questioning. And then if GentleMates actually do lose to Vegas and give Falcons their first CDL win, you almost just have to blow it up and make some drastic moves. So, this is a banger, not in the sense of two really good teams playing, but it has massive implications on what the rest of the season could look like for both of these squads.
Yeah, I was just looking at Vegas's schedule, and of course we don't know who they're going to play in Major 2 in the losers bracket, but obviously they play Toronto and LAG this weekend. They play Carolina in their qualifier finale next weekend, and then in the Major 3 qualifiers they play the Surge, Miami, which I guess you could say is like easier. Optic, honestly, we're going to be on high alert if Optic is still skidding. Atlanta, and then Boston, which is another one where it's like, okay. But like, they don't really have any easy matches left on their schedule. Like, LAG is not on their schedule after this. And that's like the only other team that has like consistently disappointed. That's really concerning. I know we said at the beginning of the season that Vegas, like, for sure was going to win a match. Like, they just, like, they have to win one. I'm getting a lot more skeptical. And
yes, 100%. I really, like,
I thought it wasn't possible.
It would have been very easy for me at the start of the season to just fully jump on the hate train, be like, this team sucks. They're never going to win a map. They're never going to win a series. And I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I really tried early on to stay hopeful, stay positive, not just totally rag on this team. But they're 0-21, I think, now in Hardpoint, haven't won a series. Like, I think all hope is out the window until I actually see something that I really don't know if it's going to happen this year for them in terms of actually winning a series.
Yeah, their schedule does not line up for that. Like, even their easiest matches, they're like, all right, like, it's going to be tough. So yeah, I think LAG, this is a great spot for them to get some momentum, but
or a bad spot.
Yeah. Miami versus Vancouver up next. Got to go with the Surge just with how they're playing lately.
Yep.
Toronto versus Optic. If I'm not picking Optic against Miami, I'm not picking them against the Ultra.
And this is the match we just saw at the minor. Toronto 3-0'd Optic there. So I have to go with Toronto again. It's kind of cool the way this schedule worked out. Not all rematches necessarily, but we're seeing Toronto versus Optic. We're seeing the finals rematch of Vancouver versus LA Thieves again. So it will be interesting to be able to compare how the series from like map veto perspective shook out and all that stuff. With Optic getting 3-0'd in that match though against Toronto, I would expect to see some different maps in the first couple picks here, but I still think Toronto is the better team right now, and I gotta pick them.
Yeah, and that match was a 3-0, but it was close in the final two maps. Like it was a 6-5 search and destroy, 3-2 control, but it was like a stomp in the hard point. So I guess we'll see what happens with Optic, and if they're able to Respawn has been their like calling card for so many years, and for them to just get blown off the map in hard point is pretty uncharacteristic of them, especially because Toronto has been not fantastic lately, just in general. And then the finale of this weekend is Atlanta versus Boston. Certainly my grand finale. I'm gonna go with FaZe, but man, it's just been a stomp every single time these two teams have played. It's been pretty much the only time that the Breach haven't even been remotely competitive.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Atlanta here too.
Which is just surprising. How does this match go on last, considering what's happened every single time that they've played each other? Daniel Say just really hates the Boston fans. Pick'em records so far this season. We both went 7-4 at minor 2. So you're 66-37 on the season. I'm 59-44. Make sure to like, subscribe, or follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening and watching on. You can give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you want, you can subscribe on YouTube. We upload all of the podcasts there. You can also watch back the live stream if you want to do so. And if you want to watch it live, then you can do that at YouTube. On YouTube, you can just look up Ego Chall Podcast. We're on Twitch as well, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. And while you're on Twitch, you can follow Bink. That's twitch.tv/JBINKK. He's at more than 50 days live streaming consecutively. So he streams League of Legends, so you can give him a follow there. You can also follow us on Twitter at JBink with 2Ks, at Preston Byers. The podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. And we will be off on Sunday, so we will not be doing a live stream this coming Sunday, but we will be back next Wednesday with a live show on March 12th. And the podcast will go into your feeds on March 13th, very early in the morning. We appreciate everybody that stopped by. Justin Mills Fallen in the YouTube chat for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. But yeah, that about does it. I hope to see you guys next week. I hope everybody has a good weekend, I guess. So usually I see all of you, or you see me, I guess is probably the better way to say it. But yeah, we'll see you next week. Bing, take it away.
Yeah, I just lost internet, so I'm on the hotspot, and I'm not gonna beat around the bush, and I'm just gonna get us out of here. Thank you guys as always for the support. We'll see you back here. It'll be a bit of a combo episode as opposed to what we've been doing most of this season in terms of breaking up the predictions and the recaps. We'll have to recap this weekend of matches and preview the final week of Major 2 qualifiers next Wednesday when we're live. But yeah, we'll be back in a week. Hope everyone enjoys the matches this week, and we'll see you back here when we're live again. Remember to send the chow.